This is your daily news brief with Aisha Mehta and Karan Rao.
Today, we are taking a massive stack of 11 distinct news items spanning geopolitical exiles, profound demographic shocks, and sporting history, and we are synthesizing them into a cohesive deep dive just for you.
Yeah, we're going to unpack a really shocking death sentence return, dissect a bizarre climate anomaly that literally defeated El Nino, and eventually figure out why the government is so terrified of a highly anticipated privacy update coming to your WhatsApp.
It's a really dense stack of sources today, but if you look closely at all these seemingly unrelated events, a fascinating through line actually emerges.
Oh, definitely.
Because we are constantly trying to exert control, over our borders, our climate, our digital identities, our legacies, while reality just keeps throwing these massive, unpredictable curveballs at us.
Right. And I want to start with that illusion of control, specifically looking at the Sheikh Hasina situation, because this headline, it forces you to completely rethink how political power works.
It really does.
For context, for anyone listening, Sheikh Hasina is the 78-year-old ousted prime minister of Bangladesh. She fled to India back in 2024 after mass protests violently ended her two-decade rule.
Yeah. And the fallout from that was just brutal.
It was. A UN report estimated that as many as 1,400 people were killed in the government crackdown that preceded her downfall.
And because of that staggering death toll, she is currently facing a death sentence, which was issued in absentia by a war crimes court in Bangladesh. So she's been in exile in India ever since.
Which brings us to the shocking part of the story today. She just did an interview stating that she, along with senior Awami League colleagues, actually plans to return from exile around December 2026 to voluntarily surrender.
Wow.
Right. She explicitly acknowledges she expects arrest or even death and says she wants to be buried on Bangladeshi soil. Now, I have a challenge the logic here. Why voluntarily return to face the gallows? Is this purely like a martyr play, or is there a mechanical political strategy I'm missing?
Well, on the surface, it definitely looks like martyrdom. But mechanically, it's a lever to shift political gravity. You really have to look at the pressure points on the ground in Bangladesh right now.
Okay, what do you mean?
Her party, the Awami League, is facing severe repression. Ground workers and mid-level leaders are in hiding, or they're just buried under legal cases. She is trying to reorganize them remotely.
Right. She claims she's been holding online meetings covering, what, 125 constituencies?
Exactly. But a remote leader only has so much influence, right?
So by physically returning, she becomes a lightning rod.
Precisely. If she lands in Dhaka, she shifts the entire political narrative. It forces the current government's hand. Do they execute a 78-year-old former prime minister and risk massive civil unrest?
Yeah, that's a huge risk.
Or do they imprison her, making her a living symbol of opposition? Either way, she becomes the undeniable center of attention. And that could theoretically relieve the immediate crushing pressure on her party workers. She's trying to force a scenario where the public, not the current government, judges her legacy.
Okay, I see the domestic political logic there. But what about the international angle? Because India granted her refuge, but New Delhi has been dodging repeated extradition requests from Dhaka.
Oh, it's a nightmare for New Delhi.
This has to be an incredibly awkward diplomatic tightrope for the Indian government.
Oh, absolutely. They don't want to hand over a longtime ally to face execution, right? But protecting her actively strains relations with the new Bangladeshi government.
Right.
So by setting a timetable to voluntarily return and explicitly stating she hasn't consulted any foreign government about this move, she effectively unburdens India. She just removes the diplomatic tension by taking the decision completely out of their hands.
It is a high-stakes move from a leader nearing the end of her life, trying to dictate that final chapter of her legacy. But, this struggle to manage physical realities while projecting power, it isn't unique to exiles.
Definitely not.
We're seeing a very different version of this play out with a leader currently at the peak of his global influence, and that's Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Yeah, his current visit to New Zealand perfectly captures this tension. It is a massive geopolitical milestone. It's the first visit by an Indian prime minister to New Zealand in 40 years.
And the stakes are high. They are capitalizing on a recently signed free trade agreement, focusing on defense roadmaps, maritime safety in the Indo-Pacific, and securing easier visas for high-skilled Indian workers.
Plus, New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon is even likely to back India's ambition to host the 2036 Olympic Games.
Yeah, it is this grand display of soft and hard power. But then The New Zealand media leaked the logistical request from Modi's advanced teams, and it completely breaks the illusion.
The contrast is just jarring, isn't it?
It's like watching a CEO ruthlessly negotiate a multi-billion-dollar corporate merger, but having to pause the boardroom meeting because they need their afternoon cup of warm milk. On one hand, you have intense high-level security protocols. They're demanding police snipers on roofs in what is generally a very low-risk country. But on the other hand, the organizers were given strict instructions to design a schedule that includes built-in nap times and prioritizes venues with no stairs.
Well, the mechanics behind that request are purely biological. Prime Minister Modi turned 75 in September 2025, and the specific request to avoid stairs is reportedly tied to a fall he suffered back in December 2019 on the uneven steps at Kanpur's Atal Ghat.
This detail just fascinates me because it illustrates the unavoidable collision between the relentless machinery of geopolitics and the fragile machinery of the human body.
Yeah.
The media even resurfaced a comment from Mohan Bhagwat, the chief of the RSS, who is also 75. He'd previously mused about leaders considering retirement at 75, though he later retracted it.
It just highlights a universal vulnerability. I mean, you can negotiate complex defense treaties and reshape international trade, but you cannot legislate away the realities of aging. The physical toll of running a nation of over 1 billion people is immense. So the logistics have to reflect that physical degradation, regardless of how much power the individual wields on paper.
And building on this idea of a leader's legacy and the long arc of geopolitics, let's look at how credit is claimed when these massive, multi-decade strategies finally bear fruit. Because right now, there is a vicious war of words unfolding over Australia's uranium export clearance to India.
Right, so India and Australia recently concluded several landmark agreements, and the crown jewel among them is a civil nuclear pact that enables the commercial supply of Australian uranium for India's nuclear power projects.
Which is a massive win for India's energy grid.
Huge.
To put this in perspective for anyone listening, this isn't just diplomatic backpatting. This is about securing the baseload power required to keep your air conditioners running and your cities lit over the next 3 decades.
Yeah, it's practical survival.
But immediately after the announcement, Amit Malviya, the head of the BJP's IT department, framed this as a breakthrough achieved exclusively under Prime Minister Modi. He argued that Australia had refused sales back in 2010 because India hadn't signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and that securing this deal now is proof of India's newly transformed global standing.
But Jairam Ramesh from the Congress Party immediately challenged that narrative. And he brought receipts.
Oh, he definitely did.
He shared media reports from 2011 showing that Australia's Labour Party, led by then Prime Minister Julia Gillard, had already endorsed and cleared the policy for uranium sales to India.
Right.
Ramesh argued this clearance was the direct mechanical result of the landmark 2008 U.S.-India nuclear agreement, which was secured by the UPA government.
Okay, I have to ask, who actually gets the credit here? Because it feels like we are watching 2 different architects argue over who built a skyscraper, while one poured the foundation 15 years ago and the other just cut the ribbon on the penthouse.
Well, if you strip away the political packaging and just look at the objective mechanics of foreign policy, it is almost always a relay race.
A relay race.
Okay, the objective facts from the sources show that the heavy lifting, the 2008 U.S. pact that legitimized India's nuclear program globally, and the initial Australian policy shift in 2011, that happened over a decade ago.
Right.
That was the foundation. However, the current administration ran the anchor leg. They finalized the complex commercial supply agreements and integrated this uranium trade into a much broader, modern Indo-Pacific strategy.
So they both played massive roles.
Exactly. Both administrations did crucial work. But in the theater of domestic politics, acknowledging that your rival laid the groundwork just doesn't win votes.
Right. We are watching politicians fight over the credit for importing foreign uranium. Yet, at the exact same time, a different arm of the government is aggressively trying to engineer a future where India doesn't need to rely on foreign fuel at all. Let's dig into Union Minister Nitin Gadkari and this massive push for E20 fuel.
This is a radical shift for the entire transportation sector. So E20 is a blend of 20% ethanol and 80% petrol. However, a widespread panic has erupted recently.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Right. A narrative is taking hold that E20 is actively destroying older car engines.
And Gadkari came out swinging against this, calling it a complete false narrative. But he did admit one crucial detail. Using E20 results in a marginal dip in mileage. Now, if I am driving an older car, why should I trust that this new fuel isn't slowly eating my engine? especially if the minister admits it changes how the car performs.
Let's break down the actual physics of what is happening inside the engine. The mileage drop is a simple matter of energy density. Ethanol has a lower calorific value than pure petrol.
Okay.
In plain terms, a liter of ethanol holds slightly less total energy than a liter of petrol. So when you blend them, the engine has to burn a little more fuel to generate the same amount of power, which means you don't drive quite as far on a full tank.
Okay, that explains the mileage. But what about the parts breaking down? People are worried about their engines.
Gadkari was adamant that there is zero evidence of the fuel itself damaging engines, assuming the fuel is unadulterated, of course. The only mechanical issue for older cars is that ethanol can be slightly corrosive to certain older metal components over a long period.
Oh, okay.
But the fix is surprisingly low-tech. Manufacturers are simply swapping out specific metal washers for rubber ones during routine servicing,
Yeah.
and they're usually doing it for free.
A rubber washer to
Right.
save an engine. That's wild. But the real story here isn't just about car maintenance. It's about the macroeconomics. India's fossil fuel import bill is currently sitting at a mind-numbing 2 lakh crore rupees.
It's a massive vulnerability.
Exactly.
And that number is the sole driver of this policy.
Yeah.
It is about insulating the Indian economy from global oil shocks. India is looking closely at Brazil, which actually engineered its entire economy to run on high ethanol blends decades ago.
Oh, wow.
The goal is to force the domestic automotive ecosystem giants like Tata, Maruti, and Hyundai to mass-produce flex-fuel engines. And Gadkari is looking beyond just sugarcane ethanol, too.
Right, he mentioned bamboo, didn't he?
Yeah, he is pushing indigenous alternatives, like bamboo-based refineries to synthesize methanol and using isobutanol as a replacement for diesel in heavy machinery.
It is a massive attempt to engineer our way out of a problem. We are literally changing the chemical makeup of our fuel to fight climate change and protect our economy.
Yeah.
But here is the profound irony. While we are busy engineering our cars, the climate itself is behaving in ways that completely defy our best scientific models.
Let's look at the monsoon data from early July 2026.
Oh, the meteorological data we saw was truly unprecedented.
Going into the season, the entire agricultural sector was terrified of El Niño. And the basic understanding is that El Niño suppresses rainfall, right? It creates a drought.
Generally, yes.
And initially, the models looked terrifyingly accurate. On July 1st, India faced a 38% national rainfall deficit. But by July 8th, just 1 week later, that massive deficit plummeted to just 15%. Mumbai's Colaba area got hammered with 1,383.8 millimeters of rain. That is almost 80% above normal.
It's staggering. How did the models get it that wrong that fast?
Well, the models didn't necessarily fail. They were simply overpowered by an atmospheric collision that no one fully anticipated. El Niño does usually suppress the monsoon by pushing dry air and wind shear into the region, but a former IMD Director General explained the mechanics of what actually happened. Both the Arabian Sea and the equatorial Indian Ocean were experiencing extreme, unusual warming.
Think of it like boiling a massive pot of water. Hotter oceans mean vastly more evaporation.
Exactly. The atmosphere was suddenly saturated with an immense amount of moisture. This surplus of water vapor fueled the sudden formation of two interacting weather systems: a mid-tropospheric cyclone over the west coast and a deep depression over the Bay of Bengal.
I love the analogy someone used for this. Think of those two weather systems like two massive atmospheric vacuum cleaners positioned on either side of the country.
It's a great way to picture it.
Individually, the dry air of El Niño might have suppressed them. But because the oceans were boiling hot, those vacuum cleaners had an unlimited supply of moisture to suck up. They merged their pull across the subcontinent, creating a megastorm system that was simply too powerful. It essentially bullied El Niño out of the way.
It perfectly illustrates how quickly nature can rewrite the script. The ocean warming just gave the monsoon a supercharge.
It's a stark reminder of how fragile our predictive models are. And, it's not just climate models experiencing massive shocks right now. Human demographic models are going through tectonic shifts. And the sources gave us two incredibly contrasting stories about how populations changed, looking at Kerala and Pakistan.
Yeah, the demographic data coming out of Kerala is historic. For the first time ever, Kerala's crude birth rate, which is the number of live births per 1,000 people, has plunged into single digits. It hit 9.64 in 2024.
To make that number concrete, live births dropped by nearly 50,000 in a single year. Now, a 50,000 drop in 1 year isn't just a statistical blip, it's a socioeconomic earthquake. Why does a drop that sharp matter to the average person living there?
Because it fundamentally rewrites the future economy of the state. In 5 years, that means fewer children entering the school system, leading to school closures. In 20 years, it means a significantly smaller workforce and tax base.
Wow, so the whole structure shifts.
Exactly. You will have a rapidly aging population relying on a shrinking pool of young workers to support healthcare and pensions. Now, Kerala has always led India in demographic transitions, mainly due to higher female education and better healthcare. So this is a natural progression. It is a society organically shifting its reproductive choices.
It is a natural, if shockingly fast, evolution. But contrast that natural evolution with what is happening in Pakistan, where demographics and minority populations are being altered not by choice, but by state-sanctioned systemic abuse.
Yeah.
The EU Parliament is currently taking aggressive action to strip Pakistan of its GSP Plus status,
And we have to understand the economic gravity of this. GSP Plus grants developing nations duty-free access to lucrative European markets.
which is huge for them.
Very huge. For Pakistan, whose economy relies incredibly heavily on textile exports to Europe, losing this status isn't just a political slap on the wrist. I mean, it means thousands of factories could go under, exacerbating an already brutal financial crisis.
And the EU is wielding this massive economic weapon because of widespread human rights abuses. The sources detail the enforced disappearances of Balak and Pashtun activists, figures like Dad Shah and Morang Balak. They highlight the strategic misuse of blasphemy and cybercrime laws to silence dissenters.
The EU resolution also explicitly targeted the horrific practice of forced conversions.
Yeah.
They flagged the specific case of a 13-year-old Christian girl, Maria Shabazz, whose forced marriage to a 30-year-old man was shockingly upheld by a federal court. UN figures indicate that 75% of these victims are Hindu and 25% are Christian, predominantly in the Sindh province.
This brings us right back to the theme of control. In Kerala, a population is changing naturally based on individual choice. In Pakistan, minority populations are being suppressed and altered by force. The EU is stepping in and essentially saying, you cannot benefit from our economic trade systems while systematically violating the human rights of your most vulnerable citizens.
It is the EU using trade leverage to set a hard boundary on state behavior.
Using trade to control a state's behavior is a very traditional geopolitical lever. But today, the most intense battles for control aren't happening at physical borders or in trade courts. They are happening directly on our phones.
Which brings us to a massive standoff between the Indian government and Meta-owned WhatsApp.
Yeah, this is a big one.
The Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Mighty We, has ordered WhatsApp to halt the rollout of a highly anticipated new feature. This feature would allow users to hide their phone numbers and communicate using only a username.
And WhatsApp has submitted their response, and the government is currently reviewing it.
Right. From a purely individual perspective, hiding your phone number sounds like the ultimate privacy upgrade. You join a large public group chat, and you don't have to worry about hundreds of strangers scraping your personal digits.
It sounds great until you look at the mechanics of cybercrime in India right now. The government is terrified because they are fighting an epidemic of phishing, impersonation, and these devastating digital arrest scams where criminals pose as law enforcement to extort life savings.
Exactly.
Let's use an analogy. This username feature is like handing out digital ski masks to everyone in a crowded bank. Sure, it perfectly protects the privacy of the innocent customers, but it is an absolute nightmare for the bank's security guards who are trying to spot the robbers.
That captures the tension perfectly. It is the modern collision of user privacy versus state security. And the government has immense legal muscle to enforce its will here.
They really do.
Under the IT Act, WhatsApp isn't just considered a simple app. It is legally classified as a significant social media intermediary.
Because they have over 80 crore users in India.
Exactly. Because of that massive scale, the law dictates they have strict due diligence obligations to prevent the platform from being weaponized. The government isn't just targeting Meta either. They sent similar notices to Signal and Telegram, who already utilize username features.
Wow.
The state is desperately trying to wrangle control over a digital frontier that evolves faster than legislation can be written.
It's a constant struggle to adapt to an environment that changes underneath your feet. And survival in any evolving environment requires immense patience and adaptation. Which brings us to our final sources today, showcasing two very different attempts to adapt on the cricket pitch.
The contrast between the Indian men's and women's teams right now is a masterclass in psychology.
Let's look at the men's T20 team first.
Mm-hmm.
They are facing a historic, miserable slump against England and Southampton. They are down 3-0, staring down the barrel of a 4-0 sweep and risking losing their #1 global ranking. It is chaotic.
It is a team deeply in transition, frantically trying to find their footing. You have anomalies like England's Joss Butler suffering through an 18-inning slump, yet his team is still winning.
Right.
Meanwhile, India's Shreyas Iyer was the lone bright spot, scoring an 80 in the last game, but the team around him is stuck in a high-pressure downward spiral. The assistant coach bluntly called out their failure to adapt to the varied, swinging English conditions.
The frantic, high-risk pace of T20 cricket is exposing their inability to settle. But then you look across the country to Lord's, where the Indian women's team is playing a historic test match. And Vice-Captain Smriti Mandhana just achieved an incredible milestone, becoming the youngest woman ever to reach 300 international matches.
What is fascinating isn't just the milestone, but her mindset going into it.
Her interview was incredibly revealing. She broke down the mental mechanics required to transition from the fast-paced, high strike rate format of T20s to the grueling red ball format of Test cricket.
Yeah, it's a completely different game.
She said she had to completely wire her brain differently. She had to leave behind the recent disappointment of a T20 World Cup, strip her game back to the absolute basics, focus on simply watching the ball closely, and cultivate the sheer patience required to spend long, grueling periods at the crease without forcing a shot.
And that deliberate mindset, that refusal to force an outcome, is the overarching lesson here. Whether it's the men's team failing to adapt to swinging conditions in Southampton, or Mandhana showing the immense psychological patience required to thrive at Lord's.
Yeah.
You cannot bully the environment into doing what you want. You have to patiently adapt to the conditions presented to you.
It's so rare to see that kind of deliberate patience rewarded so clearly. It really brings everything we've discussed today full circle.
It does. Throughout this entire deep dive, the recurring theme we keep running into is the illusion of control. We try so incredibly hard to manage our reality. We engineer complex new biofuels to manage our economy. We draft intricate, multi-decade geopolitical trade agreements. We build massive digital networks and then desperately try to regulate how people behave inside them. We create all these elaborate systems to convince ourselves that we are firmly in charge.
But the reality is far more chaotic.
Precisely. Because despite all our engineering and all our laws, we are still ultimately at the mercy of aging bodies that demand a nap, sudden monsoon surges that completely overpower our climate models, and profound, unstoppable shifts in human birth rates.
Yep.
It forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. With all our technology and diplomacy, are we really steering the ship, or are we just getting slightly better at riding the waves?
Are we steering the ship or just riding the waves? That is a brilliant and humbling thought to end on. Because no matter how much we want the world to operate like a predictable machine with clear inputs and outputs, reality is always going to be beautifully, terrifyingly messy. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take that question with you, keep examining the systems around you, and we will catch you next time.